Hello, everybody. We are moving on to Archaeology, Chapter 7. This will be the last two lectures on archaeology. This is going to be talking more about settling down some important concepts and complex societies as well. All right, so make sure you guys can hear me. Testing, testing. Is it going? Yeah, it's going. Okay. Yeah, so quick tips for the reflections. Make sure to check the commentary on your reflections so you know what you got wrong or right or whatever. And also, a lot of times like you're gonna get stuff wrong. And I'm still gonna give you credit because it's not about being right, it's about being like on topic and paying attention during the lectures. So just make sure to check that, okay? Also for reflection one and only for reflection one, I gave you feedback and you can resubmit for full credit. So if you haven't done so, please do so. For reflections 2 through 5, if you do it wrong the first time, then there's no redos. Okay. Some quick tips for reflections. Please only use information from this class, from these videos or from the reading, mostly from these videos though. And you can use the PowerPoints as a guide as well. Those a lot of the answers are in there, honestly. So just, keep that in mind while you're doing this reflection. Okay. All right. So, after understanding a little bit about past, what are some key factors in humans being able to live they do today? So, as you can probably imagine, right, going from, being essentially nomads, right, where we're like moving from place to place and we are hunting and gathering and all this other stuff, to what we're doing today is a very different kind of lifestyle. But if you think about how long ago that was, it wasn't that long ago, that we were living like that. So, after this lecture, I want you to kind of take away what are some of the more important things that developed over that time that influences us to live as we do today. Okay. So some quick environmental background. Until about 10,000 years ago, humans and their hominid ancestors were all gatherers and hunters living in bands. As we know, living in bands are the smallest group of humans that can live together like that. Or sorry, smallest society of humans that live together. It's about 50 people. Again, these are just general categories, so keep that in mind. And then glaciers retreated and earth-changing climate created new ecological settings. So if you were to now, so the kind of the logical theory, and we're going to talk about why that's not necessarily the case. The logical theory is that, the ice age ended, and because it ended, maybe things such as really big animals went extinct, right? Such as woolly mammoth, saber-tooth tiger, stuff like that. Basically stuff that could kill humans. And on top of that, smaller animals were able to live, were able to thrive, do better. And so that allowed humans to live on, allowed more humans to live off of the small stuff that was there, right? We could kill more things and eat them, but also there were less things hunting humans. That's kind of the logical theory. But as we're going to talk about at the end of this lecture, these are all theories, right? We don't know for sure what happened, but what we do know for sure is that around 10,000 years ago, that's when we started doing well in the world, okay? And just so happened at the same time, the glaciers were also retreating. Okay, so the climate was changing as well. So those are the two facts. Okay. Now, this is a very important concept right here, right? So human imagination is one of the most in this class, it's very misunderstood, right? Human imagination, if you look it up, it talks about humans being able to imagine things that aren't there, which is very important generally. But for this particular class, and particularly for archaeology, we're going to be talking about these few things. I'm going to explain it even deeper as we go on. So dependence on culture helps humans survive, but is also a source of freedom. Cultural traditions arise out of imagination and cultural experimentation with the material world. So that's the first point right there. Without human imagination, culture, which is one of the most distinctive attributes of humans, would not be possible. Okay, let me say that again. Culture, which is one of the most distinctive attributes of humans, would not be possible without human imagination. Okay. Traditions can become entrenched and affect future actions, right? Cultural traditions become a part of people's everyday lives. And because of that, it influences the way that they do things, right? Now, this seems pretty obvious at first. How does this apply to archaeology? In particular, right? Humans can have similar life ways in different environments or different life ways in similar environments. And sometimes in some societies. So basically, let me give you a good example. What this is trying to say basically is that human um, adaptation, human behavior, human anything is unique to each human, right? And why is that important in archaeology? Just because you are a group of people that live near water, let's say you live near the Mississippi River, and there's another group of people that lives near the Mississippi River, it does not mean that you guys will have the same ways of living. Okay. It does not mean that you will both catch fish the same way. One of you might not even eat fish, right? And that is important for human imagination. We're going to talk about that later again. But it is it is human imagination is important in archaeology because of that, right? Human reaction to the environment for in this particular case is going to be different no matter where you are, no matter how similar the environment is or how different it is, right? There are people that are across the world, maybe from this group that is living in the Mississippi River and catches fishes with nets that live in, let's say, Korea, and they also catch fish with nets, right? It's not predictable, okay? So just because basically someone lives near a river, just because someone lives in a forest, because someone lives in a mountain, does not mean that they are going to have similar or different, for that matter, um, reactions to the environments. Okay, so basically, what this whole thing is saying right here is that humans are very, very unpredictable. Okay, and again, just because it might seem logical that they have the same thing, it is often not the case. Okay, that's just very important. We're gonna talk about that in a second. Let's see. How do I get this? Okay. Uh, wait, something going on? Wait, hold on. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. Here we go. All right. Yes, very nice, very nice. So, yeah, so just keep that in mind, okay? So the biggest thing I really want you to pay attention for human imagination is one, human culture would not be possible without human imagination. And two, if human imagination wasn't a thing, we'd all be doing the same thing. Okay, we'd all be kind of solving problems the same way. And you'll see what I mean. This will become more clear as we talk about domestication later on. So domestication, right? This is probably one of the more important things in this particular part of the lesson. Um, it's when humans have controlled reproduction of a local species. Sorry, is when a reproduction of a local species interfered with the human action. Basically, if we have control or interfere with a animal or plant's reproduction, then that means that animal or plant is domesticated. Okay. Now, this top part, I don't know, actually, probably shouldn't bold this anymore, but niche construction, right, is actually a biological term. It happens when an organism actively changes its environment or a new environment. So, for example, spiders, they build webs, right? Beavers, they build dams. Birds, they build nests. Ants, they make ant hills, right? These are all things that change their environment, and that is considered niche construction, right? For humans, our niche construction, as nests are for birds, is domestication. Okay. Now, this is very important. Okay. When we are talking about the definition of domestication, if you use the word tame, I'm going to be very sad. I'm going to cry. Okay. Please do not use the word tame. Reproduction of local species is interfered with by human action. That is the definition of domestication. I'm going to say this again. The definition of domestication is when the reproduction of a local species is interfered with by human action. Okay. Animals is very obvious, right? When we have chickens, you take some of their eggs, we put the eggs in, whatever, right? Or with cows, they purposely bring bulls in to breed them, and so they have babies and stuff at the same time. Yeah. So animals are pretty obvious. But when we talk about plants, that's also pretty obvious. You just probably never thought of it. You ever think about stalks of corn or the cornfields? Do you think corn naturally grows in such a beautiful, like, you know, rectangle? No. We have to plant it that way in order for it to grow in that organized fashion. That is an example of us controlling the reproduction of that corn. Okay. So keep that in mind. Okay. And because we are modifying our local environment with domestication, it is considered niche construction. Okay. Very good. So please make sure to get the definition of domestication down. All right, now this is where things get a little spicy. Okay, this is where the quiz question is. So humans, sorry, well, it depends which year you are, but this is probably a quiz question. So, human changes plant domestication, sedentism, or settling one location became increasingly common for farmers. Wild plants like wheat were to transform through domestication. So, if you look at this, right now, if you are familiar with the word sedentary, all that really means, usually it's unfortunate, it's unfortunately usually associated with lifestyle. When they say you have a sedentary lifestyle, what they're talking about is that you're basically a couch potato. You're not moving around enough. Okay. Now, when we're talking about this in terms of archaeology, though, sedentism is referring to our society. Okay, our settling in one location, right? Now, the reason why that's important is because when people speak about the contributions of domestication, right, which is like farming and stuff, like why is it important? The obvious answer is that it contributed a lot of food to our society, which is not wrong. However, for this class, I'm going to say sedentism is the most important contribution to our societies overall, and especially in the earlier days, right? So if you look at, first of all, when you look at if I were to ask you to become a farmer next week or even tomorrow, would you know what to do? No. And let's say you even like Googled it, YouTubed it all over the place, and you put it in there, you do all the things that they tell you to do. Is it going to be a perfect crop? Of course not, right? All of our knowledge of farming has come through a very, very long period of like, trial and error in the beginning and now research, all kinds of stuff, right? Now, imagine our ancestors who are, again, just, getting off of like randomly following things around and hunting them, trying to grow food. Do you think that that food is going to grow really well? Like the first two or three times that they do it? No, even the fourth, fifth time, it really depends. So the most important contribution of domestication to our development of a complex society in this particular class is going to be sedentism, right? And why is that? Sedentism is staying still. If you look at our society today, this still influences our society deeply, right? If you moved from Brooklyn to Queens, is it that big of a deal? Not too much, right? If you move from New York State, though, to Wyoming, or sorry, to Wisconsin, would that be a big deal? That now things are starting to get difficult, right? And then when you move from one state, or sorry, one country to another country, it's even more difficult. And why is that? It's because our culture is largely built off of staying still. And if you look at, so for example, if you go from city to city, yeah, you might have to change your school district, make sense to change some things on some forms. It's not too much of a big deal. But when you move from state to state, that's when you got to get a new driver's license. That's when if you have things like I don't know, what's that thing they get the certification for like the AC people? HVAC, you have an HVAC certification. If you are a lawyer, if you're barred in a certain state, if you are even a dentist, is a dentist? No, it's something else. Doesn't matter. Main point is when you go from state to state, it's you got to redo it or you got to apply for a new one, right? And then even worse is when you go from country to country, that's when you really, really lose a lot of the stuff that you've gained in wherever you were originally, right? So, for example, I know there's a lot of immigrants here that used to be like doctors or like whatever lawyers or these very like these positions that take a lot of training, but because their training doesn't translate over here, or the school's training doesn't like translate over here, they aren't considered doctors or whatever, right? And so if you look at the influence of sedentism on our culture, it is still seen today, like whatever, like 10,000 years later. So that's why for this class, we're going to say that sedentism is the greatest contribution to our development of as a complex society. Okay? Sedentism is the greatest contribution of domestication to our development as a complex society. Okay, very good. So let's talk about animal domestication a little bit. Domestication of animals is very challenging to see archaeologically, but can be indicated by these following attributes. So right now we just talked about kind of like what domestication is, but I also want to give you the perspective from the archaeologist. It's not so easy to see. As we talked about the last one or two ago, preservation of the archaeological record is very important. And as we know, animals are organic matter. Obviously, their bones and their remains are organic, and so they decompose very fast. Okay. Now, that being said, it is very difficult to see, but not impossible. Okay. So here are some indicators if you find some animal bones and know whether or not they are domesticated. The first one is animals outside their natural range. If, for example, chickens are native to California and then you find them in New York, pretty clear indicator that they are domesticated. Okay. Physical changes in animal shape and size. This might sound, oh, sorry, oh yeah, this might sound like it's pretty easy to see, but it's not. We all know, because we're lucky and we have records, that dogs are descendants of wolves, right? But if you didn't know that, and you compared a poodle, for example, sorry, the remains of a poodle, for example, to a wolf, I don't know if you necessarily think that they were part of the same family line, right? And so that's why it's a little difficult. It's easy for us to see the poodle example because we have record of that genetic change. But if we didn't have record of how it changed, then we wouldn't know if it was a different species or just part of the same family. Okay. Now, these last two are kind of the same. So an abrupt increase in animal numbers in one location, as well as an increase of numbers of males killed for meat. So you look at a lot of older societies, even today, most of the males are usually killed for meat because the females are used for other things like milk or eggs or whatever it is, right? Let's talk about the first one first, right? So if you are an archaeologist and you dig stuff up and you come across this huge heap of bones, right, of like chicken bones, let's say, you can probably assume that they domesticated chicken because they would not die like that just naturally and all in a bunch. That's number one. Number two, if you can identify that most of the animals that died in a certain, you know, archaeological dig are like all males, then you could probably assume that they were used for meat. The last one is really the hardest one to see because, like, imagine trying to determine whether a chicken or a cow or something was a male through finding like a femur bone. It's very difficult. So again, as an archaeologist, it is not easy to see whether an animal is domesticated or not, but these are the indicators if we were to see it. So we believe that animal domestication occurred in 6 stages. Random hunting, controlled hunting, herd following, loose herding, close herding, and finally factory farming. Random hunting is exactly what it sounds like. You see something, you hunt it, eat it, good to go. Controlled hunting is selective, right? Now you are starting to be like, okay, maybe we'll kill this today, and not kill something else because whatever reason, right? You're starting to become a little more intelligent about the way you're hunting. The next one is herd following. Again, exactly what it sounds like. You're just following a herd. When you follow a herd, you end up having kind of like an endless supply of food until the herd like dies, basically. So that's, an advantage. Loose herding. So loose herding is it's kind of like you have some control over what's going on, but you don't have full control of the reproduction, right? So it's like, oh, like in a more like less control instance, we're following this like group of deer, and I don't know, like a wolf is about to kill some of the deer, and you protect the deer from the wolves because the deer is your source of food. That could be considered loose herding, right? Yeah, so that's a good one. And then close herding is kind of like what you would imagine as an organic farm. By the way, that's all a lie. Very few farms are actually like that unless their eggs cost like $20 a dozen or whatever, but it doesn't matter. Close herding is what you would imagine at an organic farm. And finally, factory farming, where we're killing things like, 100 chickens a minute type of thing. That's factory farming. Okay. So when we're thinking about domestication, right, a lot of scholars have tried to like kind of pin down what the reasoning was for why domestication came about, right? Now, the first theory, right, is broad spectrum foraging. Okay, and this basically is saying like, look, the end of the ice age happened, and then it was a lot easier for us to hunt, fish, gather, basically live. And then of course, because we got more food, our societies came bigger, and then we ended up staying still. When we stayed still, this ended up having like we needed more and more food basically, and then we ended up having to domesticate wild plants and animals. That's a pretty logical process of how, we got to be domesticating. However, there is also something else called feasting competitive exchange, which is competition. Which is when competition between local groups with dominance um, became may have spurred domestication. Feasting competitive exchange might have increased demands for food. Land use would have increased development of food production followed. So let me break that down for you. That's basically different groups of people flexing on each other. Be like, yo, like you're a group of people, you eat like, 50 fish, F you, I'm gonna eat 60 fish. And then the other group's like, oh, you eat 60 fish, I eat 70 fish. Boom. And then so basically there's a little bit of a competition and a rivalry between us two. And then we're like, wait a minute, there's no more fish. We need to find another way to find food because there's no more food. And thus, we develop domestication. Now, obviously the second one does not sound super logical, right? But this is where human imagination comes into play. Okay. Now I want you to ask yourself, do you always make the best decision? No. I oftentimes know that I should be eating vegetables, but I am not going to eat vegetables. I'm going to eat pizza. I know that I probably shouldn't go out to drink tonight because I have to go somewhere early in the morning tomorrow, but I still end up going, right? We don't make decisions off of pure logic, right? So why would our ancestors be any different? Okay. So this first one, yes, it sounds very logical, but wouldn't it be logical to not drink past 12 a.m.? You do so anyway. Just because it is logical does not mean that that's what humans actually did. Okay. And we need to understand that, yes, even though these people lived a very, very long time ago and their circumstances are very different, human imagination is something that is all across Homo sapiens, right? All across humans. So with that in mind, right, this is the answer to the prompt on the um, on the reflection. Okay, which one of these two are more possible, or sorry, are more more probable? They're both equally as probable, right? They are both equally as probable. I'm gonna say that again. They have the same chance of occurring, even though this first one sounds significantly more logical to happen. They are both equally as possible to happen. Okay, because remember, we as humans don't do things based off of one logic or one way of doing things. We have a lot of different ways of doing things. So it is no surprise that I'm sure some societies were like flexing on each other and they ended up having to domesticate because they exploited too much of their local resources, right? So keep that in mind. I purposely use these two examples too because like this one sounds super logical, this one doesn't. But anyways, this second theory emphasizes social factors, and that's something so important that we need to keep in mind because we have to understand again, our ancestors were humans, obviously, and so our ancestors, right, have human imagination. It is no surprise that they will have their own ways of doing things and won't just follow the logical road that we think they might have taken. Okay. Now, aside from that, so now you got the answer to the prompt. But so another fun thing is remember what we talked about with domestication. It's a similar thing with competitive feasting, right? For flexing on each other. It's kind of difficult to see that archaeologically because what are you gonna do? Dig up a bunch of bones? And if you dig up a bunch of bones, how are you gonna know that you're in competition with the other local group? So that's another thing, right? And again, just because we can't find it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It did not happen. Okay. All right, so we have a couple of interesting examples here that basically counter what we just talked about, okay? So I want you to understand that these things that we're talking about today, and actually even in the past couple lectures for archaeology, these are categorizations that we've developed off of our findings. It doesn't mean that it's true, right? We only use the words band, tribes, chiefdom, and state because it fits our current needs and our current categorizations we do not know if humans actually developed this way. Or like, for example, the animal hunting thing, right? We believe it happened in this way, but we don't actually know. So just keep that in mind, okay? And not to say that we're wrong or right, it's just to say that there are many exceptions to these rules that we're using, okay? So early domestication in Southeast Asia, recent studies of the 12,500-year-old Natufian culture used the multiple strand approach. Sedentism was possible initially without domestication. This is very important. Natufians settled in villages of 40 to 150 people, which is pretty big. They intensively exploit wild resources in a small area. Sites show evidence of social stratification, a form of social organization in which people have unequal access to wealth, power, and prestige. It's pretty straightforward. So basically what this is saying is that the Natufian people, right, they settled into small or to villages, right, of 40 to 150 people. They were a complex society. They had social stratification. For those of you that don't know, it's basically different. It's like a hierarchy. Like there's like classes, like king, knight, merchant, peasant, whatever, right? So they had all that, but guess what? They didn't domesticate. Okay. So basically, what this is saying is that this did not follow kind of the roadmap that we just laid out. Okay. Another example. Oh, wait, what? Oh, sorry, that's next. But anyways, the main point here is that there are many examples of people that did not follow the kind of roadmap that we just kind of drew out, but it does not mean, sorry. So it is important to keep note that this just because they don't fit perfectly into the other things doesn't mean anything. It just means that that's how that the society developed. Okay. Now, just some interesting stuff. Domestication in the Americas, domestication of plants and animals occurred independently in three areas of America. Mesoamerica, maize, corn, and squash. South America, manioc, potatoes, beans, quinoa, and llamas. Llamas is interesting. And this is the last one. This is the one I wanted to actually share with you guys. Eastern United States, which is where we are right now. Goosefoot, marsh elder, sunflower, and squash. If you are familiar with Marine Park Preserve, yeah, it's just Marine Park basically, but they have like a little nature area. I think all of these things, maybe except for squash, are actually in that preserve. So those things are actually natural and native to New York. When we talk about domestication and sedentism, it's not all good. It's not all bad. It's not all good. Domestication sediment had drawbacks, but societies became too dependent to return to foraging. This is very important, right? This is when a lot of people, when you ask them, like, why did people start farming or why people continue to farm or continue to domesticate or whatever, and they say, oh, it's like the more efficient way to get food. They're not wrong. But the reason why we don't hunt is because we don't know how. Does that make sense? Like, it's not a choice for us. Like, I have no idea how to hunt, if that makes sense to you. I only know how to go to Seatown and buy like a freaking family pack of chicken, right? That is something that we don't know how to do. So it's less about what's most efficient and more about what people are used to and what they're doing already. Does that make sense? And that's important. I know it seems like a small thing. The only reason why it's important is because of the human imagination concept again, right? Because it's less about, right, doing the thing that's efficient, and in this case, more about what people are already reliant on doing, which in this case is domestication. Okay. So land was no longer freely available, obviously because you had to stay still. Land was no longer freely available. Populations grew. Diseases were more readily spread. Surplus production of food became possible. Social stratification, so complexity increased. Let's talk about the easiest one first. So populations grew, obviously, more food, more people. Surplus production of food became possible because a surplus of food, it means just more than you need. And because of domestication, obviously we had more food and we could store extra or have extra. Social stratification and social complexity increased. That just basically just means that societies started developing rules and different categories for people. And this last one right here, diseases were more readily spread. Now, this is very interesting. A great example would be like COVID. If we were running around hunting things, COVID wouldn't even be a thing because COVID requires us to interact with each other in buildings and indoors and all this other stuff. Like you need to be sedentary in order to have COVID at all, right? Now, that being said, though, if you look at our ancient societies, it is no surprise that we have developed things such as a good sewage system because people very early on in our human ancestry realized that if you If there's too much of, if your bathroom is too close to where you eat, then you're going to have a lot of problems, health problems in particular, right? And that's where that comes in. Okay. So full circle, right? So what are the some key factors human being able to live they do today? The key factors are human imagination, and in this case, and in this particular lecture, domestication. Okay. Remember, imagination, first important point is culture comes from human imagination. And second point, without human imagination, we would all think the same. Okay. And when we say the same, I don't mean exactly the same, but what I mean though is that we would all kind of follow the same logic to solve problems, such as what we talked about earlier with the domestication, right? Or sorry, with the reasons for domestication. Even though certain things sound logical, I need you to ask yourself, do we always do things that are logical? Of course not. There are a lot of different factors that go into us making a decision. Okay. So that's the first thing, human imagination. And number two is domestication, which again, don't give me the wrong definition, is the control of a plant or animal's reproduction. Okay. So if you use the word tame, I'm going to cry. Just because you tame something doesn't necessarily mean that you've domesticated it. Okay. All right. That's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next lecture. As always, if you have any questions, please shoot me an email at raymond.fong at kbcc.cuny.edu.